So let's start there.
Let's go.
Chris Kilmurray, welcome to Podcast of the Day. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from France. How are you?
I am pretty good, actually. Yeah, zero. A lot of mountain biking at the moment, a lot of outdoor living and life, a lot of good weather. So zero, limited complaints, and lockdown restrictions are kind of lifted. For us here, anyway, we're pretty rural, pretty kind of in the mountains, locked away when there's no tourist season. So it's kind of like normal at the moment. It's this interseason between summer and winter for us. So at the moment, everything's just hunky dory, really.
Yeah, sounds like a hard life. How much are you getting out on a bike?
I made a plan post lockdown. So when our restrictions were lifted, because prior to this we had a kilometer radius and 100 meters vertical to go outside. So we've gone from super fascist restrictions to now at the moment it's pretty much limitless, really. So I kind of made a plan to just make sure I spent as much time as possible outside riding bikes, just to kind of get the specific fitness back and the skills and just the general enjoyment of outdoors. So I'm currently riding a lot, which means sometimes with a young family and work and everything else, that means 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. There's a big window of bike riding time available. So the long days at the moment, it's cool.
Oh, that sounds lush. And so we know each other from the UCI, Mercedes-Benz Mountain Bike World Cup. That we
have that one.
How many times have I had to say that?
Yeah, sponsor's dream. The rest of us just call it the World Cup, you know. Those don't get a look in.
But yeah, so I mean, I know you as the performance coach of Tiny Seagrave, one of the professional downhill mountain bikers, but you're a lot more than that. Can you tell our audience just exactly who you are and what you do?
I suppose your performance coach kind of encapsulates it pretty well. So I cover everything from the physical preparation right through to kind of technical, tactical, psychological, the whole gamut, holistic approach to performance improvement. So that's away from the races and then after races, and the races being the Enduro World Series and the UCI Mountain Bike World Cup presented by Shimano, Mercedes-Benz. So I cover the whole gamut, and I work with a range of riders of different ages, but now currently professionals only. So throughout my career, I've kind of ebbed and flowed between working with, you know, amateurs, juniors, masters riders, professional athletes, and a little bit of everything between all of the mountain bike disciplines: cross country, downhill, enduro, and everything else. And at the moment, I just exclusively work with professionals in the gravity disciplines, so enduro and downhill. So there you go.
And in your history, you're also a coach's coach, is that right?
Yeah, I've done quite a bit. I went back to school, let's say, and I went to the World Cycling Centre in Switzerland, which is only about an hour 15 away from where I live here. So it was a commute every day for a diploma in specifically mountain bike and BMX coaching. So it was like a 6-month intensive live-in diploma to do at the World Cycling Centre in Switzerland, and I just commuted back and forth because it was relatively close to home. And they obviously liked kind of how I did what I did. They asked me to come back and be a coach educator for them. So it was an interesting experience, because initially I wasn't experienced enough myself to deliver the tacit knowledge. I was good with the explicit knowledge, the book stuff, you know, the foundations and the kind of principles of training and that sort of stuff. And it was actually something that helped me develop as a coach as well, was the tacit knowledge, giving people the actual hands-on, this is how you coach face to face, and this is what actually makes a difference, you know. So that was something in my career that's kind of slowly developed alongside the coaching, and it's kind of brought me literally everywhere. I've been everywhere from like Turkey to Iran to the Caribbean to Costa Rica, Brazil. It's like brought me all over the shop, really. Yeah. I did like a live-in 9 weeks in the Caribbean, getting paid to live on a beach, basically.
So I am in the wrong job, number one.
I'm back in the wrong. We're at the UCI like World Cup presented by Mercedes-Benz now. It's not the place to be, I can tell you.
So where did your love for biking come about?
I suppose initially from my dad was always into motorbikes, always had motorbikes when I was a kid. So that was something I always saw in the garage. And obviously any child sees a motorbike, sees their dad riding a motorbike, and it's just the coolest thing ever.
So cool.
Yeah, so I was just like always kind of interested in bikes and cars, so anything from rally to Formula One to Moto GP to motocross, whatever else. And I suppose we just rode bikes because motorbikes weren't an option when I was a kid, and that slowly progressed. And then we went to a mountain bike race in Ireland, the national champs in 1989, I think it was. And the reason we went was basically because you couldn't ride mountain bikes properly back then without going to a race in Ireland. The only place you could ride downhill, the only place you could actually kind of get together with more than, with people you didn't really know to get together and ride it. Like, it wasn't like today where you have trail centers and you have all the different spots around the world, bike parks and everything else. It was way more low key than that. So we just used to go to the races as an excuse to ride. And it just kind of grew from there, basically.
Where in Ireland did you grow up?
A little town in the center of the country called Athlone. So literally no one will know it.
But lots of open countryside and flat, any hills and
no, literally
super flat.
Like it's the Midlands. It's got peat bogs, and in the highest hill within, I'd say, 100-kilometer radius was about 80 meters. So
you had to really love biking if you were going to bike.
Yeah, like we just learned how to ride in like the local woods, which had a couple of like dips and rises and some trees, and that was about as far as it got, hence why we kept going to the races, and hence why racing became such a big focus. And then from there I just kind of progressed to I went to university to do civil engineering, realized I hated that, and was like, right, sports science is the one for me. So went changed to sports science, did my degree in sports and exercise studies, or whatever it was called at the time. Maybe less science heavy, more practical focus, which in the long run was a cool thing. And just slowly developed from there, really, yeah.
Did it kind of certify at all when you moved across to Morzine, which obviously is like a mountain biking summer Mecca?
Yeah, it was. I came here first, like on holidays a few times, but then I came here first to race myself, 2007, I think it was. And just to have somewhere to base myself in Europe, to go to all the races. And I basically, I suppose, split my time 50-50 between partying and riding mountain bikes. So it was like ride mountain bikes during the day, go to the nightclub all night. And that was the standard downhillers thing to do back then. You like go.
I think it's still the standard downhillers back thing to do, isn't it?
It's kind of, now there's a lot of training that happens now, but there's still definitely partying. But back then it was just like ride, party. It was just like, that was it. It was two sides of the one coin, and that's where I kind of came here first and came back again the next year, and then I just stayed. That was it. So here we are.
Here we are. And so the big reason in inviting you on this podcast is very much that since everyone's been locked down in isolation, they cannot access gyms. And I think that a lot of people, if they're into sport, are going to find a way to do it. CrossFit is included. So a lot of people have been picking up bikes for the first time. And I'm hoping you can give us a little insight into what you need to do when you first start biking. So you've got that old rusty thing in your garage, you decide to pull it out. What are the first things you should be thinking about when you pick up a mountain bike for the first time?
It's a funny one, because I'm thinking when you say to me CrossFit, I'm thinking about Concept 2, released the bike erg maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. And it's becoming more and more prevalent. I see them everywhere now, the bike erg. But if you're actually an experienced mountain biker or an experienced cyclist of any kind, and you get on one of the Concept 2 bikes, you're like, this isn't a bike. Bikes do not feel like this. Like they literally
they ruin you, those Concept 2 bikes.
Yeah, they're
absolutely ruin you.
I think similar to the ski erg, the rower is probably closest to the real movement of the actual sport, whereas the ski erg and the bike erg are nothing like the real thing. And I was thinking, actually, a lot of CrossFitters, whether recreational or competitive, or anyone who uses CrossFit programming or CrossFit style training just for general health and well-being, they benefit so much from actually knowing how to ride a bike. Like the whole gamut of changing gears and gear selection and position and posture and seat height and bar height and all the little details that in the beginning you're kind of like, yeah, whatever, but actually make a huge difference to performance. So I suppose getting a bicycle that fits, or making the bicycle you have in the shed fit you as well as it can, is probably the first place to start for sure. So seat height, bar roll, just making it comfortable. What I always see with people who aren't very experienced with bicycles is the saddles will always be too low. So you'll pedal, you'll pedal through kind of half range of motion with the legs, whereas actually when the crank's at the very bottom, so your pedals are down here, one's up top, one's at the bottom, you want hip and knee in a pretty decent amount of extension. And that's kind of one of the first places to start. Is get a bike that fits you, get something that's comfortable, something that you can sit on without any kind of soreness or aches or pressure points for, 45 minutes or more. And that's kind of the first place to start, I think.
So what kind of duration should people be looking at in the first, say, month?
That's a real tough question, because I work with, with the real
Professional
hardcore
athletes.
yeah, the real hardcore downhillers though, who hate going on a ride for more than half an hour. Like, there's some of them, like,
I've heard that. I've seen Anne-Marie do a piece where he's just like, oh, if I get programming that says more than 2 hours on a bike, I literally just cry.
Yeah, and that's partially like a psychological thing, where they just kind of need to be entertained or do something that's enjoyable or fun. And it's also partially a physiological metabolic thing, where actually they're not very built for endurance, and they don't particularly train endurance. But then there's the other end of the spectrum, and there's guys and girls who race World Cup downhill, who are the best, and a 3-hour ride for them is nothing. So it kind of goes both directions. And I think for your average person who's just starting to cycle, I think the people will always fixate on distances. You see challenges like 50k or 20-mile challenge, that sort of stuff, but actually quantifying your initial kind of introduction to cycling in terms of time is definitely the way to do it. It's an easier way to kind of get a feel for how you're progressing and how you're challenging yourself, in a progressive overload kind of way. So I'd say just half hour, 45 minutes to kickstart with and see what you learn. And then obviously it depends on terrain, it depends on body mass, depends on your shape. If you're a 120 kilo male CrossFitter that can, clean and jerk, 1.5 times your body weight, you're probably pretty wide, and you're about as aerodynamic as a small truck. So an hour on a mountain bike for a big strong weightlifter, or an hour on a bicycle, is potentially a lot more challenging than it is for me at 70 kilos.
That's amazing. And I know obviously in your world, the bikes are, as bikes are top of the range, top spec, everything you can get, and they are completely defined to the athlete riding them. Is it an issue just to be on a bike that is 70 or 80 quid free from Gumtree or so?
Freer the better. Just go for it. Yeah. I think it's just like literally like anything, literally anything. As long as it works, I think that's the main thing. Like, as long as it's in sound condition, nothing's loose, and your chain, sprockets, that sort of stuff is in pretty good condition, clean and well oiled, so you're not wasting watts. That's about all you need, really. Just a clean, well oiled bicycle. That's it.
Is there a way of tracking and recording performance when it comes to biking without shelling out for loads of gear?
Yeah, like it's probably the opposite end of the spectrum. There's too many metrics available. If you use an application like Strava, or if you went to the, if you have a smartwatch like an Apple Watch, or something from Garmin, or something from, Polar, or whoever, there's an endless supply of watches out there. I'm not sure what's popular in the CrossFit world for recording training, but
Whoop we've got at the moment. Whoop is kind of the only thing.
Whoop's pretty good, and I don't know how whether the Whoop, I know that it records mountain bike rides and cycling rides. I don't know if it does GPS as well.
I don't think it does. I think it's more of a energy source and outgoing. Yeah.
It tries to record the vibrations, I think. And but there's too many metrics available, so I'd say keep it as simple as possible. If you're going to use your smartphone to track your metrics, you're looking at time over distance. That's like the two main things: time and distance. And you'll see increases in average speed over a particular distance. You'll see changes in how long it took you to do a particular climb or a particular route, and those sorts of small, simple metrics are definitely the best way to start. So if you're going to go for a 45-minute ride or an hour ride, and you've covered X duration, and now you can cover 5 or 6 kilometers more, you've clearly progressed. And just keeping it super simple like that. And then obviously you can dig into more challenging or more interesting metrics on Strava or Garmin Connect or any of the endless applications that are available, but just keep it fun, especially if it's something that's going to complement hard training or competitive training, and it's something that's just going to be on the side for the enjoyment or for the relaxation or the recovery, or just to spend more time outdoors. Then reducing the amount of metrics you have is definitely the way to go. Just keep it fun.
How do you introduce a new sport like that if you're already in a functional training program?
I think relatively cautiously, and cycling's fantastic because it's cycling on the road is low impact. Mountain biking is different, especially like actual mountain biking, when you can actually ride a bike properly off road. The amount of impacts we deal with is pretty high. The G forces you deal with are pretty high, and the vibrations, the muscle and the body have to deal with are massive. They're way beyond what's allowed in the workplace, for example. Like a World Cup downhill run is totally against EU laws in terms of vibrations in the workplace. So if you're getting
That's actually brilliant.
if you're getting paid to race World Cup downhill, you're actually breaking the law. But anyway, it's
How did I not know that? That's such a weird but brilliant stat.
Yeah, it's funny. A good friend of mine did a PhD in enduro mountain biking, and part of his PhD was on the immunological response to vibrations in mountain biking. And he has he's got, if you want the data, he's got the data. It's phenomenal what he did. Like white blood cell count changes based off, minutes at this amount of vibration. And it was just like way too much science for me. But, cycling or mountain biking in terms of it being low impact means it's easy for people to start. And the big issue arises with just knee pain or back pain just from, poorly set up and poorly positioned bicycles. But once you get a bike that fits pretty well, and you're looking at starting below what you're capable of, it's the same as running. Anyone who starts running and is relatively fit can run 10 or 15 kilometers, but it's usually too much to start off with. You get shin splints, you get sore ankles, you get sore knees. So take a similar approach and just start a little bit lower than you're capable of, progress it, steadily, and you'll be absolutely fine.
I'm probably asking you like some of the most basic questions you've ever been asked, but I just think it's a good kind of like starting point for people who aren't kind of in touch with the sport. Turbo trainers, because a lot of people can't actually get out, can they, on roads or in forests or whatever. So
or don't want to, maybe as well.
Yeah, or don't want to. What are the key differences between, apart from the obvious that you're stationary, between riding a bike on turbo trainers versus actually getting out in the countryside?
There's a lot of differences, and historically, you've had your turbo trainer, your indoor kind of home trainer that you connect your bicycle to, so the back wheel has a bit of friction, off a magnet system, and they never really fully truly feel like a real bicycle because the resistance is not exactly like the road or off-road, but they're fantastic because you can control the intensity really, really well. So cyclists love to use them for training because the intensity is so easy to control. So you can go from high intensity back to low intensity, do your intervals or do your kind of your on-off type work that obviously everyone in CrossFit's super familiar with. You can do that work really easily. Now, this day and age, we've got what they call smart trainers. So companies like Wahoo, and I'm trying to think who else. There's an endless supply of companies out there that do some amazing smart trainers, which feel a lot more like a real bicycle. And they've got a mix of magnetic and air resistance. And they've even got ones now where the front of the bike will lift up if you go up a hill, a virtual hill, the front of the bike lifts up for you and stuff. So there's literally an endless supply of kind of home virtual type training methods. But the key to remember if you're going to start cycling as a form of training or just exercise indoors is that hydration and temperature are two of the big things that aren't taken care of by the wind. So you go outside, ride a bike normally, you got the wind blowing in your face and it helps you dissipate your heat. So you sweat like normal. Your body, sends blood to the periphery, to the skin to help get rid of heat, to keep the core temperature and the brain temperature in an acceptable level. Indoors, you don't have that. Indoors, you're just stuck in a little furnace, basically. Even if you're in a cold garage or a cold shed, you'll end up getting very hot very quick. So professional cyclists or anyone who's serious about cycling and who's training indoors will often use a fan. They'll always have a towel, and they'll always make sure to hydrate as they would outdoors, if not more. So that's kind of the key. If you're going to start indoors, you could probably aim to start shorter and introduce things like intervals sooner, because obviously sitting for endless hours indoors, like proper endurance training indoors, is mentally extremely taxing and boring. Maybe you want to use your virtual stuff like Zwift, and you definitely want to keep a good eye on hydration and temperature management, really. So use a fan, keep the sweat off you, do whatever you need to do to manage temperature, right? Do it outside. A lot of people like to do it outside if they can during spring and summer, sit outside in the garden instead of in the garage,
In your kind of wider knowledge of cycling as a sport, how much could that tide someone over from something like a 5-day-a-week semi-pro loose term CrossFit athlete just by cycling and then expecting to go back to a routine as they had before once isolation is over?
Yeah, I think obviously there's many ways to look at that, and one side, a slightly more negative side, is that it's not specific. So if you do CrossFit competitively or semi-competitively, or you do it to compete for your own enjoyment, then obviously it's a specific sport and you need to train specifically for your sport. So cycling will only kind of fill a gap, let's say. On the other end of the spectrum, it's a new stimulus, it's a novel stimulus. So it's something that's going to give you potentially better training effect, better adaptations than you've ever had before, because you've done the same type of training for so long. So if all you've ever done in terms of, cardiovascular, metabolic, or aerobic training is a rower, a ski erg, and body weight, or Metcon type circuits, then you get on a mountain bike or a road bike or a stationary trainer, and all of a sudden it's like a whole new world of pain and hurt. So especially initially, is in terms of efficiency, is so much lower for someone who isn't a cyclist. So because efficiency is so much lower for someone who isn't a cyclist, perceived exertion is higher straight away because you're just not as good at it. So the emotional side of your training gains will be augmented like instantly. It's like, This is the hardest thing I've ever done. And like you said with the Concept 2 bike, you get on it and you're just like, what is this? This is just terrible. It's the hardest thing in the universe. So I think you can definitely make some big gains, and you can make some big gains in terms of cardiovascular fitness, so directly for heart, lungs, and also peripherally in the legs and the lower body. You can definitely maybe make some changes there that once you get back to more specific training, you'll actually see a knock-on positive benefit. It might take a few weeks, but you'll see a big positive benefit.
And we've seen cycling events appear at the CrossFit Games for the last 3 years, and starting to creep into sanctionals as well. I know Filthy 150, which is the Ireland-based sanctional, Trek sponsored one of their events, and it was a 4K kind of bike race, road race, and into a 1K run. How do you then, as a CrossFitter, start? So I'm just choking on my own spit. It's really attractive. How do you then?
I have that effect,
How do you then start training as a CrossFitter to incorporate regular biking, knowing that it might come up in competition? What things could people be doing into the gym?
Genuinely, if you're genuinely serious about CrossFit competition, even if it is only regional level or a lower level, but regardless of your aspirations, searching out a cycling club or searching out someone who is an avid cyclist, or most certainly an avid mountain biker, to help you could be really advantageous. Because I did see maybe the first time CrossFit introduced off-road cycling into the games was when it was in Wisconsin, and because that's where Trek
2016 cyclocross.
Yeah, I think it was 2016. Yeah, they called it cyclocross, but it definitely wasn't.
It wasn't. Yeah.
And I watched it, and I watched it with a couple of the riders I coached, and we all picked up on the same stuff. We were just literally just throwing away, seconds and minutes by poor gear selection, poor positioning in the bike, not knowing how to corner, not knowing how to stand up and pedal, so many basic things that you just clearly see people hadn't trained. I think it was maybe something that was introduced pretty later. I don't know the ins and outs, but you could clearly see that the bike positions were all wrong. Didn't know how to corner, didn't know how to change gears, didn't know how to stand up and pedal, the real basic stuff for us. So I think if cycling is going to become more and more like actual cycling, not Concept 2 cycling, actual cycling is going to become more and more part of CrossFit competitions, and seeking out, a cycling club, a mountain bike club, or any sort of professional advice like a mountain bike coach would literally be a performance gain that could equate to seconds and minutes, I'd say, for your CrossFit games. Massive. From what I saw anyway, what I've seen on YouTube, there is some free time to be had.
It's so interesting, actually, because the things that I as a kind of a non-biker, wouldn't notice at all. But when you're watching the guys race, and you're saying how to corner, how to stand up, what are you actually seeing? Where are they going wrong? So obviously, I assume a corner, you're meant to be obviously you lean into the corner. Okay, yeah. So this is what I mean. I don't have a clue.
It depends on the type of corner, but you lean the bike. So you keep your center of mass relatively stable over the center of the bike, and then exactly, the bike leans underneath you. So then you get the weight, the inside of the tire, so the inside of the tire grips, and you don't lose traction. You can corner faster. And yeah, you can see so many little bits and bobs like that, just poor gear selection. Obviously, super strong athletes who can produce a lot of torque on the cranks because they have so much strength in their muscles, but then not knowing that they need to be in the hardest gear they can kind of deal with to actually push that heavy torque driven kind of power, and they were just spinning a real easy gear and they just don't have the leg speed for it, because obviously leg speed like that is a really specific skill, and you can see they just kind of didn't know which way the hands had to move or the feet had to move or the fingers had to move. So it was just fundamental bike riding technique and skill that needed to be worked on. So I'd say that's where you need to go if you're looking to improve your cycling. It's the basics.
It's interesting, that just show how little I knew about it. Like, so like body type as well. Surely very, very. I mean, I look at the girls who ride on the elite world circuit in cross country, and then I look at the girls who are professional CrossFit athletes competing at the CrossFit Games.
Difference.
It's a huge difference. So I mean,
it's a huge.
And that assumably comes from the nature of training that sport. So can there, just playing devil's advocate, actually realistically be any sort of crossover when you get to a certain level?
Yeah, well, I honestly, I think it is literally opposite ends of the spectrum between cross-country mountain biking professionally and professional CrossFit. And both sets of athletes, especially on the female side, like you said, would benefit so much from learning some skills from each other. And obviously the strength aspect that the female CrossFitters have is so impressive. Like most of those ladies are stronger than the vast majority of men who race professional mountain biking. But it's a strength sport, so it's kind of just obvious, But at the same time, when I watch CrossFit Games or any CrossFit competition, I'm always, as a coach, I'm always very aware of how poorly aware some of the athletes are of where their bodies are in time and space. There's a big emphasis put on output, getting this number of reps done or a maximum number of reps done. Like the difference like between a kipping pull-up and a normal pull-up. And there's an emphasis on just smashing out a maximum number of reps. Now there's obviously a huge technique focus behind it, but at the same time there's kind of maybe a lack of care or diligence in certain aspects, and that lack of care and diligence in certain aspects of what the rest of your body's doing would get you crucified in a mountain bike, because you lose traction and either crash, or you're wasting energy by being, like a cross-country female, when they're climbing, you'll see them relatively low. They'll always stay as low as possible because they're trying to stay as aerodynamic as possible. So they're maximizing how much, wattage they're putting into the cranks. So I think both ends of that, there's so much to learn from both ends. Like that, it would be as a crossover kind of training camp to get professional CrossFitters and professional cross-country mountain bikers together for 2 weeks so they could learn from each other would be, I think, the be all and end all, I think, really.
Yeah, like, because completely on the flip side, could CrossFit ever, or is it used when doing the gym side of training for athletes in downhill and cross-country?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's quite a strong influence, primarily because of social media. And because the CrossFit athletes, CrossFit style of training, let's say, is so impressive to look at on social media, and it's so prevalent that mountain bikers because the mountain bikers are so keen on social media anyway, they see so and so clean and jerk this much, they see some sort of a circuit involving a medicine ball and a rowing machine and a barbell, and they're just like, that looks like fun, let's do that. So then it's my job to kind of cut through the bullshit and to cut through the stuff that is not beneficial for us or not beneficial for that particular athlete, but still keep the elements of CrossFit that is motivating and entertaining for them, because obviously motivation is the number one driver of performance improvement. If you're not motivated, you're not getting better. So yeah, it's really, really interesting to see the influence CrossFit's had, but at the same time, I suppose CrossFit's been influenced by other sports as well. CrossFit initially is just an amalgamation of other more established sports, and it slowly itself became what it is now, which is its own thing.
What's the kind of thing that you're coaching athletes at? So, I mean, we're not exactly in pre-season, are we? But say we're in pre-season, what's the kind of things that you're giving them in terms of programming?
Well, the programming, the key elements of the programming would stay. There's a lot of similarities throughout the year, and then it's kind of a wave loading approach or an emphasis approach where we will focus and put more emphasis on specific physical qualities or specific characteristic qualities, we'd call them, at different phases throughout the year. But this time of the year, or any time of the year, there's always a big strength stimulus for us, because eccentric strength for a mountain biker is super important. And strength globally, so you can maintain posture on the bike regardless of what happens on track, is key. And obviously, the easier it is for a rider to maintain posture on the bike, the easier it is for them to apply technique. And the easier it is for you to apply technique, the easier it is for you to get from A to B as fast as possible. And at the end of the day, that's the only goal. So, you know, all our basic strength maneuvers, and I think a lot of CrossFit athletes would recognize, at least my programming, that look at it and go, oh yeah, I know what that is. You know, supersets of strength exercises, upper lower body, you know, start off with your power moves, progress to your plyometrics, onto the strength maneuvers, finish with some accessory work, and then maybe some sort of metabolic conditioning at the end. And that sort of, for our gym-based or our strength-based programming, that sort of kind of line up, going from our dynamic warm-up to our explosive work, to our plyometric work, to our strength work, to our accessory work, to our conditioning work, is give or take different sessions holds throughout the year. So the CrossFitters would definitely, they'd understand most of it, that's for sure. And they'd probably beat us at all of it. So
what do you find are the key differences between your downhill athletes and your enduro, who have got a bit more cross-country element to their sport?
Yeah, there isn't a whole pile of difference really. Everyone's a mountain biker first and foremost. Where the differences creep in the gym especially, is that the volume of riding the enduro guys have to do to be race fit, to be race ready, and the volume of training they need to do on the endurance side of things, so they can exceed the demands of the event. And by exceeding the demands, I mean that they can recover quickly after multiple days, and then recover quickly to race again the next weekend. That volume of training means that it does take the edge off a lot of the gym work they do. So we have to be extremely tactical and extremely, I have to be extremely smart with the planning, and they have to be extremely diligent with the execution of a training program to actually make it work. Because if you don't get the nutrition correct, you don't get the recovery and the sleep correct, and the amount of rest between sessions, doing a 3-hour bike ride, doing a 3-hour bike ride followed by your strength work can become pretty depleting pretty quick, you know.
I mean, we've spoken about it before when we were talking about you're dying now. That's what happens when you talk. Everyone just talks too much and it just happens.
Zoom.
But yeah, it's always it's too many conference calls. But that idea of finding a mental edge to what you're doing, how do you kind of, is that something that your athletes are just born with pretty, but have developed over time, or is that something that you're constantly coaching into them?
Yeah, it's something that's, for us, it's paramount to performance. And I assume it's to a degree it's the same for CrossFit type athletes, but I think it's even because we're in a sport that's against the clock. You race on your own, and while it's physically super demanding, if you are technically developed well enough, then the physical side of things is just a huge compliment. You can actually do pretty well being pretty unfit, let's say. And that's where the mental side of things lets people down the most, is that actually the missing piece of the puzzle, or the biggest weakness many riders have, is the mental side of things. And for us, it's like, I've always said, there is some people, through whether it's nature or nurture, through their parenting and their childhood, they actually have a real broad set of mental skills that really, really helps them be successful mountain bikers. But then there's the opposite end of the spectrum, and it's obviously kids have had terrible parenting. And I'm here trying to undo 16 years of bad parenting, basically, or for whatever reason, to just mentally not equipped with focus, the ability to focus, the ability to cope with setbacks, the ability to manage their own mental energy and efforts, the ability to channel energy in the right place at the right time, in the right dose, and all of those things. So that's something we work at endlessly. And I've worked with loads of athletes who've eventually gone on to work with sports psychologists because they needed it, they felt like they needed it, or I just wasn't either cutting the mustard, or just didn't have the time to devote to that side of things. But I think in terms of training plans, training programs, and the long-term kind of development strategy we put in place for professionals, it's in every aspect of the program. So like I said, motivation being maybe the biggest factor in terms of physical progress and and kind of technical, tactical progress as well. So everything we do is based around building the most motivational program possible for an athlete. And then from that point onwards, we start to like drip in, specific training sessions that really challenges their ability to focus, that really challenges their fears, that really challenges their abilities to deal with setbacks or to execute under time pressure or emotional pressure and that sort of stuff. So it's definitely everywhere. And I suppose the longer I spend at the professional end of the spectrum, the more I realize that it's literally the only thing that matters. Basically, the programming for strength training, the programming for your fitness is the easiest by far. And like almost anyone can do it. It's easy to do a bad job, but it's also easy to do a good job. So it's that end of the spectrum, the mental end of the spectrum is by far the hardest.
Setbacks as well, something that's kind of transcends sport, isn't it? Like everyone has to deal with it. Workplace, in CrossFit, biking, blah, 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 blah. And how do you encourage, or how do you find people motivation to get through moments like that? And why do you think some people are better at it than others?
I don't know where the better comes from or whatever. It's really, really interesting. It's an amazing question because it's impossible to answer, I think. And it comes from where the motivation comes from. And a lot of people, the best athletes are motivated intrinsically. So the motivation comes from inside. And it's not just about the trophies. It's not just about the results. It's about being the best version of themselves. And any of the athletes I work with that eventually find out that their purpose, their reason for being, their reason for racing is just to be the best version of themselves. It's not necessarily about first place. It's just about being the best them. They're the ones that deal with the setbacks the easiest. They're the ones that always keep the goal in mind, always keep the goal. And they don't kind of get wound up in the negatives. They don't get, they've got small ups and downs throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year, like we all do. But invariably they keep the vision, keep the focus on the long-term goal of being the best version of themselves. And that's something that I've seen kind of transcend all of the best athletes, is that actually they'll tell you they're motivated by winning. They'll tell you they love to win and they want to be the best in the world. But somewhere deep underneath, it's actually they just want to be the best version of themselves. They don't want to let themselves down. And that seems to me anyway, that they're the ones that deal with the injuries, deal with the setbacks, and deal with the long-term difficulties of any career the easiest by far.
And that seems like a very good place to leave it. Some nice motivational words for people to take on board. And
it may not help you when you're sat on your Concept 2 bike just dying. It might do, might not.
As I said, I don't have a Concept 2 at home, bit pricey, but I do have my assault bike, which I have lived on in isolation, and I sat on it for 30 minutes yesterday, and I was a broken person.
Savage. I coach an athlete who bought one recently, an assault bike. He bought a rower and an assault bike for home gym, mainly due to lockdown, but he always kind of wanted a home gym. And we were discussing, high intensity training. So some of the intervals and some of the benchmark tests we do that involve both pieces of equipment, and he's adamant the assault bike is the easiest by far. The easiest one to die on.
The easiest out of the rower?
Yeah.
And the assault bike.
He thinks, like, for him anyway, the rower was by far the most.
But then I guess if you're a cyclist, do you have like the kind of the musculature required on your legs? So
yeah.
But they're all quite similar movements. It's all quite similar. Like it's anyway. My favourite's the ski erg, but again, it's too big to fit into my conservatory gym. So the bike it is.
Yeah,
but thank you so much, Chris.
All right.
Sorry, we're on a delay. Yeah. Go on, no, ski ergs are. Don't leave us hanging.
Well, ski ergs are like we always say, like, the rower doesn't care. Like you just give the rower everything and it just takes it. It just doesn't care. But the ski erg seems to be a gentler beast. Like you can caress it and you like give it a little rub, and it's like yeah, I'll be nice to you. It's okay. Whereas the rower is just like, nah, just please die. Just die now.
As are the bikes, to be fair. But no, thank you so much.
I've not used them enough.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I don't mean to keep cutting you off. We're obviously on a bit of a delay.
Satellites.
French internet is what I'm learning. French internet. But really appreciate you taking the time. And I hope everything is beautiful and lovely for you for the rest of lockdown. And I'll hopefully, all fingers crossed, see you in September when the season starts.
Yeah, cool. we're gonna get a summer of training for the first time ever. So crazy, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's good for training, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing. It's gonna be, if everyone survives summer, if all the mountain bikers actually survive training during summer and get to autumn for racing, it would be a big surprise.